So welcome everyone. I'm Meridian Grace, and you're just joining us on the Awakening Health Show. And today, I have to admit, I am so excited about more and more in-depth research that I've been doing to help to understand why it is that people have just been having so many serious health issues over the last number of years. And everything in history tells me that it just wasn't this way back in the 1700s. So I found an amazing book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Firstenberg. I highly recommend it, even though it's a little bit daunting when you look at it, because there's so many pages. Probably 200 of those are just full-blown research. Arthur, to me, is like not only an extraordinarily brilliant, original thinking medical doctor, but also a medical historian. And he has come to recognize that electricity is one of the most profound effects, has one of the most profound effects in the quality of our health. And I am not talking for the better. It appears that from the very beginning, when we started electrifying the world and creating electrical wires, that the people that were exposed to them started having horrible, horrible health issues. And interestingly enough, the people who were suffering the most were people in their 20s to their 50s, young, healthy people in the prime of their life, many of them very physically active, and they became exhausted. They started having horrible heart arrhythmias, many of them having heart attacks at these young ages, pregnant women dying and losing their babies. It was just shocking, because up until that time, doctors had rarely ever seen a heart attack. If there was such a thing, they would be willing to travel hundreds of miles to see it because it was so rare. And it appears that the thing that has mostly contributed to our heart disease issues in the industrialized world is bringing electricity into our world. And not just that, but the levels of cancer, the levels of diabetes, the levels of arthritis, the levels of chronic fatigue, exhaustion, ringing in the ears, depression, but especially anxiety. All of these have grown, and we can see this on statistical charts, side by side with the electrification of the world. Some of the beginning names of these diseases were telegraph operators' diseases, because they were some of the first people who were exposed on a daily basis all day long to electricity running through their fingers and running through their bodies as they were clicking away to send information. And then things got even worse with more health issues, including severe dementias. And I have to stop for just 1 second to tell you that all of this information is painstakingly, bit by bit, recorded by Arthur with the exact name of the doctor, researcher, physicist, engineers, the dates, the times, the universities they were working with, the hospitals they were working with, and specific case studies of the people that have had these diseases and the statistics. The absolute incredulity of the doctors who were working with these patients in shock, because they had never seen these health issues before and they had no idea why it was happening. And then there were a few that started to look at these horrible symptoms that were happening to people in relationship with the electrification of our cities. And it was interesting because when you went into rural areas where there was no electricity, people still were not getting ill. They had the same levels of health. They enjoyed the same qualities of mental health, the same health that they had before the electrification happened, and it wasn't until the electricity hit them, and once the electricity hit them, we started seeing the farmers getting horribly ill. Now, the thing that I'm coming to understand is there's two primary ways that human beings get poisoned. One of them is through electricity and EMFs, the whole family of EMFs, and what's happening now with taking on stronger and stronger levels of electrification. Because every time we have strengthened the intensity of electrification, new diseases have showed up, or more intensity, or percentages of those people who became ill increased. And that is clearly happening with areas that are now blanketed with 5G. Now we're seeing these unbelievable types of symptoms around what we're calling COVID that interestingly match the electrification diseases that people had, where they were bleeding from the lungs, where they weren't able to clot properly, where they had no energy, where they had fevers. I mean, it's just shocking if you look at the research of how this all began, how closely it matches what's happening to us as we are producing this crazy situation with electrification. And it also appears that some of the earliest diseases were basically caused by bites of insects. For instance, all the research is provided by Arthur about how smallpox was actually caused by bedbugs. And at a time when people were still living in abject filth, where when you walked down the streets before there were cars, you were walking in feces. And the water was polluted by this feces. So people did not have clean water. And there was also some very, I think, antiquated belief systems that illness was caused by evil, and that you didn't want to let your windows and doors be open to allow fresh air into your house because that would be letting in evil. So people didn't even have fresh air if they were in an environment where they had some available to them, rather than the filth that was happening in the cities. So we see the importance for a certain degree of hygiene where we have clean, pure water to drink. And as many of you know, I am such a fan of the work of Dr. Thomas Cowan and Viktor Schauberger. And both of them have done some of the most profound information about the importance of not only the water that we drink, but the water that our own mitochondria produce. And what that requires, interestingly enough, is something that people didn't have, which was fresh air. To be outside in the sunlight, to have our feet on the ground. Those are two things that would incredibly benefit the functioning of our mitochondria. And what harms our mitochondria? But poisons, electrical poisons, and the types of poisons that we're now incredibly exposed to from pesticides. Interestingly enough, you know, here we thought that biofuels were going to be a wonderful answer to preventing our excessive use of fossil fuels. And now what we're finding is that they're making these biofuels out of basically grains and corn and things that have all been grown with glyphosate. So our air is being totally filled with glyphosate in environments where biofuels have been mandated, like in Hunan. So we're having difficulty with breathing because of the high percentage of toxic and large-sized molecules in the air that are very harmful to our lungs. We're being electrified in such a way that our bodies are not able to support us in healing. So let's talk about what healing is. Because so many of us today are so incredibly influenced with what I consider to be truly pseudoscience. And that's what I believe allopaths are doing. They're using pseudoscience. They have not looked clearly at what the whole germ theory is. They have not considered that the work of Pasteur has been proven to be absolutely fallacious, and that in order to be able to give somebody a germ, you had to poison the germs in order to put them into the body. In order for Pasteur to make anybody sick from a germ from another person, he had to poison the germs, and he had to add horrible toxic substances like aluminum, which is insanely harmful to our brains, and arsenic, and things of this nature. And then he had to do crazy things like drill a hole in the head of an animal and put this kind of toxic substance, which was just a mash, it wasn't even filtered, infectious materials, but solid materials, directly into someone's brain, into the brain of a monkey, and said, now we've proved that this germ causes the monkey to get ill. When it wasn't a pure filtrate of the germ, it was a blend, oftentimes, of cancer and horrible toxic chemicals in a physical mash that nobody's body could handle receiving. We were never designed to take in through our skin in an injection form like that. We were designed to take in through breathing, through bathing, through our skin molecules, through eating, and possibly even through enemas, through those types of orifices, but not puncturing the brain in order to see if something would make a difference. This kind of research is all there for us with Arthur Firstenberg, and also with a number of the talks that Dr. Thomas Cowan has done for us, where he's painstakingly gone through the details of some of the top virologists in the world who have disproved what we are calling contagion. And he's written a fabulous book called The Contagion Myth. If you have the curiosity and the willingness to explore the possibility that we may have been wrong for a long time. And the doctors who are part of my world now are in shock about the misinformation that they've been given as they start doing this research. Many of them are so dismayed by the years that they've spent learning pseudoscience and actually doing harm to people from this lack of true science that appears to be showing up now, finally, for us to at least consider, to put it into our hopper. And I think we each owe it to ourselves to explore this and see what makes the most sense to you, what speaks most truly to your heart. Take a look and see what Koch's postulates were all about, and how there is not a single one of Koch's postulates that have been fulfilled by any of the work that we're doing with COVID at this time, and particularly not with the vaccinations. So I really, really encourage you to, with an open mind, explore some of this information and see what's true. Don't just blindly accept this, because you may be causing harm beyond our wildest imaginations if you just accept these belief systems as true. It's my experience at this stage of my work, after 50 years, to actually look at our bodies as the wisest, most brilliant, amazing, supportive entity. Our forms, our bodies, our brains, our circulatory systems, our immune systems, which is even being questioned at this point, if we should even call it that, our communication systems within our bodies. And what we've been doing is treating our bodies as if they are just plain stupid. We've been acting as if the body produces a fever, that what we need to do is get rid of that fever, without acknowledging that the first stage of healing of the immunity has to do with producing a fever so that we can start moving out toxins. And Dr. Cowan uses an example that I absolutely love. It's so simple, it's so basic. He talks about when we get a splinter, it's painful and it gets red and it gets inflamed. And if you feel it, it's going to be hotter than the rest of your skin. You're going to have a mini fever in that location as your body works to try and move that splinter out. And if the heat is not enough, it was going to produce fluids. It's going to produce mucus. It's going to produce pus. And what do we do in allopathy? But we say that the problem is the pus, the infection. And then what we do is give somebody an antibiotic. But the antibiotic is stopping the healing process. The healing happens with the pus pushing the splinter out. So if you don't pull the splinter out it's yourself, your body is going to push it out. Well, that metaphor works for just about every health condition that happens. If you smoke, you're putting mini splinters into your lungs. And at one point or another, depending upon how much fresh air and exercise and quality of life that you have, most likely you're going to end up with bronchitis or pneumonia. And what is that? But that's a fever that's accompanied with a lot of mucus, whose job it is to try and push out those splinters, the splinters of the smoke that you put into your lungs, which is poisonous and toxic to you. So your body is trying to get rid of these things. And instead of encouraging and supporting the fever, instead of encouraging and supporting this mucus and pus formation, we try and stop it. That's not going to help us. That actually leaves us weaker and more unhealthy. But if we support the healing process that our bodies are showing us that it's trying to accomplish, encourage the fever, it'll push things through quickly and we'll end up stronger and healthier for the process. So we have just done things so backwards, and me too. You know, even the whole arena of herbs. Typically, if you're hot, we give you something to make you cold. If you're too dry, we give you something to make you moist. If you're too moist, we give you something to dry you out. But we're not supporting the body in completing the process that it started, which is one of the reasons why I love homeopathy so much, because that's what homeopathy is doing. It's supporting your body in completing the process that you began, and to do it with oftentimes incredible ease and speed, because it appears that there are levels of energy that are happening in our world that we cannot easily measure, although the Egyptians knew how to measure them with very special devices, and I'm studying all of this right now in the extraordinary science called biogeometry. But we can actually see how energy is flowing. Like, for instance, this form here. If we were to put this in water, the water would flow around this and create a wake that would be different than if this wasn't in the water. Well, electricity, we can't see it, but electricity is going to flow around this as well because it's wave, EMFs, electromagnetic waves. And there are waves that have to do with etheric bodies and mental bodies and emotional bodies and spiritual bodies that are all moving around form. And the brilliant work of Dr. Ibrahim Karim in his work called BioGeometry explains this to us and how to use forms and architectural shapes to create an environment that supports our body in operating at high frequencies of healing energies and balance and peace and joy. So it's really exciting to start exploring this world. I've only finished the foundational training, and if it's meant to be, I will continue all the way to be a practitioner of this work. But I'm already seeing shocking things happening with signatures that he has discovered that are a drawing of the shape of a flow of energy, like in the heart, or in a particular tissue in the eye, or a particular tissue in the ear, and how drawing those on the body can make a really huge difference in the healing process, and how our bodies are restoring themselves without interfering in the body's own wisdom. It's actually supporting the body's wisdom. So homeopathy does this. It appears to me, the more I experience it, the more I'll be able to tell you from firsthand experience. The biogeometry is doing this. And honestly, sunlight is doing this. The Schumann waves from the earth are doing this. The things that humans were designed to experience, being out in nature, in a forest, where we exhale what's toxic to us, CO2, and breathe in the healing oxygen that the trees produce, utilizing our CO2. And the incredible biome of the earth and the network of communication, like the network that goes from our spine all the way out through our bodies. There's a network from the trees that spreads out for miles, sharing information amongst the trees with each other, which we're beginning to understand more and more. We live in a miraculous world, and there is so much for us to begin to really deeply explore and understand, and to start questioning with a heart about why things are the way they are, not just accepting what we've been told, but to really look and see, what is it that truly makes us happy and whole? Which brings me to the work of Dr. Stephen Porges and his Safe and Sound work, his Safe and Sound protocol, which I've had the great honor to share with a number of patients and friends of mine who are doctors. I find it so interesting that my open-minded doctor friends have just been so moved by the quality of this work to help us to have the capacity to move beyond the fear that danger brings up, and to have the ability to move into states of safety pretty quickly, to have resilience to release those experiences that are beneath our conscious layer in the autonomic nervous system, called the sympathetic and parasympathetic, the vagal nerve, both dorsal and ventral, and how they store information and profoundly affect our organs, because every organ has a relationship to the autonomic nervous system. And our digestive system is very deeply hooked into the dorsal system, the sympathetic system. And when we're, needing to feel that, well, when we feel danger and we feel like we need to run or fight or flight, the body in its wisdom says, during this time we don't need to be digesting, during this time we don't need to be regulating a lot of special functions of detoxification. We just need to get that energy into our limbs to have extraordinary levels of physical strength. We want our hearts to pump really hard and fast so that we can really move quickly. And we want the part of the brain that is focused on one directionality. We want to get that left side of the brain activated so that we can figure out the fastest, most effective way out of there, or to get the strength and capacity to beat somebody up, to save our lives. And the crazy part is that we are living under low levels of stress, and for some people not even low levels of stress, but consistent stress. And if their go-to is that sympathetic nervous system, then we're going to find that they tend to have higher blood pressure because their heart is going to be beating fast, and severe digestive problems because their body isn't interested in trying to digest for them. Their body isn't really interested in doing a good job of getting rid of poisons from the liver. We're going to see all of these really important functions harmed. So now what am I talking about? I'm talking about the importance of finding a way to be in peace. And during these times, fear is what is being broadcasted everywhere by so many people, which is something that will weaken us more than almost any other thing, taking away the capacity of our bodies to move the poisons from electromagnetics and the poisons from glyphosates and all kinds of chemical poisonings that are in the air and the water and the soil and our food. The chemicals that are in our houses, I mean, almost everything that is certified to be used as a building material is loaded with one type of chemical or another, particularly heavy-duty formaldehydes and fire retardants, which are known carcinogens. So we're just basically, for the most part, living in plastic bags, because there's plastic between the walls and the outside to prevent rain getting in. So plastic toxic bags, that's what we're living in. And it's high time that we start using the brilliance of our creative minds to explore what it would be to actually build homes that are non-toxic, that actually nurture and feed us. And that, again, is some of the amazing work of Dr. Ibrahim Karim. And he's not just talking about healthy building materials. He's talking about creating an environment that is like the healing special sites, like parallel the qualities of things like the pyramids, or Lourdes, or special cathedrals, or power spots, the kind of places where you walk into and you just go, oh, as your whole nervous system relaxes and feels the specialness of the energy in these locations. And we can, by understanding the science of form, create these kinds of environments in our home. We can negate the harmful energies from EMFs and actually transform them into these kinds of healing energies that you would find in these special spots. And Ibrahim, a professor of architecture, has done this in huge studies. It's amazing. There was a group of more rural people in Switzerland who had a cell tower put into their environment. And for the first time, these people started experiencing horrible headaches, inability to sleep, horrible joint pains, and on and on and on, mental issues, anxiety, high blood pressure, numerous different symptoms. And they demanded that this cell tower be taken down. And in Switzerland, they could have gotten away with that. But the owners of the company that produced the cell tower went to Dr. Karim and said, "Can you help us?" And he said, "I will help you if you allow me to do an in-depth medical study of the people before and after I use my forms to transform the harmful EMFs into beneficial healing waves." And they said, "Certainly." So they started out doing blood work on the people of the town and had them all fill out a very in-depth questionnaire about all of their symptoms. And then they took that same information, again, after Ibrahim applied the forms to the cell tower. And what did they find? The people's blood work normalized, and the majority, over 80% of all the symptoms that they were experiencing from the time that the cell tower went in were gone. And for many people, health issues that they had had all their lives had gone away because of the power of the sacred geometry called BioGeometry that Dr. Karim had implemented. And you can study about it. He's written 2 beautiful books. One is Back to the Future, where he talks about the foundations of this. And the other one is, I should get it and show it to you, but it's BioGeometry Signatures. I don't remember the exact name, but you'll see the words biogeometry and signatures in it, and of course the author is Ibrahim Karim, spelled K-A-R-I-M. Perhaps at the end of the YouTube we'll show you some photographs of the books so you can see exactly what they are, and they are available on Amazon and probably booksellers everywhere. So these are ideas that I encourage you to start to explore. Why? Because they're healthy, because they support us in finding answers through simple means. So there's a couple of things that have been foundational to me. Many of you know that I had colon cancer many years ago and healed it. And I've never stopped studying about cancer all these years. And the bottom line is, my body knew eventually what to do to turn this around. And through working with the brilliant psychological spiritual work of Stephen Levine, I was able to work with it emotionally and spiritually. And by working with pancreatic enzymes, I was able to break down the tumors, I believe, that were part of my body, because pancreatic enzymes break down proteins that are exogenous and harmful to us. So it literally, the way we understand it, is broken down the outer wall of the cancer. And doing detox work, particularly for my liver and gallbladder and kidneys and lymphatic system, really helped to move those toxins out of the body so I wasn't hurting myself by breaking down the cancer cells. But Dr. Warburg did tremendous work and even won a Nobel Prize for showing how cancer lives on sugar and will not live in an oxygenated environment and will not live in an alkaline environment. In fact, it produces its own acidity. And so there are very simple things that you and I can do to help to oxygenate ourselves and to send alkalization into toxic materials. And there's really interesting work by Dr. Nsimi from Italy, where he was using actually IVs of baking soda. But we can very simply either take Alka-Seltzer Gold, not regular Alka-Seltzer, but Alka-Seltzer Gold, which is basically a baking soda product, or we can take baking soda and combine it with a little bit of maple syrup or blackstrap molasses. And because cancer and unhealthy cells thrive by eating sugars, the sugar from the maple syrup or the molasses, blackstrap molasses, will guide the baking soda, which is extremely alkaline, to the unhealthy tissues and support our bodies in getting rid of it. Pretty amazing. Very simple, very inexpensive. And if you wanted to, you could even have fun with it. Alka-Seltzer Gold's kind of fun because it bubbles and, you know, does this fancy effervescent thing. But you could always add a little bit of pomegranate juice to it, or lemon juice, or make it into like a spritzer, and you can enjoy it. And there are numerous different websites that talk about using different amounts of baking soda and slowly building up to more and more baking soda and actually less and less maple syrup and things that are sweet, as we guide the alkalinity into the tissues that are overly hungry for sugar, which are harmful to us. The other thing is the oxygen. And so drinking oxygenated water, and there are some very interesting forms that we can buy. People are also doing oxygenated baths, Those get extremely expensive, but I am looking into buying a whole house system to have oxygenated baths available for my patients, because people are having such profound results by oxygenating their bodies, and their bodies know what to do with that, and getting well from serious diseases, because their bodies are healing their own cancers with this oxygenated water. So there is a really interesting water that's been being used and studied for a very long time. I don't know if any of you saw the movie called Kaqun, but in that movie there was a situation where a group of elderly people were in this water, and all of a sudden these special elements hit the water and they all became young again. Well, it appears that oxygen can do that for us. I mean, maybe not turn back the clock 30 or 40 years, but it can help to oxygenate and restore the health of our cells. And there's a type of water that they have called Kaqun Water, but it's spelled K-A-Q-U-N, water. And it comes from the Orient, and you can buy it. And if you were to have cancer, they would recommend drinking as much as 2 liters a day. But if you just want to upgrade your health, if you're an athlete, if you're wanting to experience the highest quality of health that you could drink half a liter a day of this oxygenated water. And I'm exploring right now, playing with a really lovely aerating device. I already have a reverse osmosis and 4 carbon filters and an ultraviolet, and I use extraordinary fulvic-oriented minerals from Cellcore that I also make available to my patients. And I'm putting this water into an aerator and aerate and causing a vortex in the water that Schauberger talked about, Viktor Schauberger, and that Dr. Tom Cowan talks about. And it's lovely water, and I'm hoping to see some changes as I get on with it. But I'm going to take a minute and go grab it and show it to you. So it has a battery in it so that it will continue to vortex without needing to be plugged in, but I do keep it plugged in most of the time. And you can see the little vortex that's happening here, spinning in the water. And I also have some devices here that create that special frequency of healing that is also supporting the water. And I have other special water frequency devices attached to my water systems, so that we have real healing water here that's also vortexed and aerated and oxygenated. So I'm so thrilled to have found this. For years I was looking for vortex machines, and they were either thousands of dollars, really beautiful, handmade, extraordinary things from Europe, or made out of plastic, and I just did not want plastic. And the company's name is Mayu, and you could buy this online as well. And I think it's well worth it. If you are using reverse osmosis water or distilled water, you're going to want to put your own minerals in it so that it's live and oxygenated water. So I use my CT minerals, but there are, you might have others that you find are your specials, but if you've never used CT minerals, I encourage you to give them a try, because I've never found a mineral to be so exceptional as this one. So my friends, we're talking about a few primary principles. The first one is, let's look at our bodies as all wise. Let's honor the wisdom within our bodies. Let's learn to trust our bodies and support our bodies in the process that they are trying to accomplish. Let's look for real food, food that's produced during the time of year, that we eat the food that grows in the location where we live during that time of year. Or the food of our ancestors, of our DNA, and what our ancestors ate, because it grew during this time of year. Let's honor nature in that way. Let's spend time showering in the oxygen of the trees and in nature as often as we can. Let's get our feet on the ground. And I recently found, it's a gift actually from my chiropractor, some lovely little shoes that have leather soles which will allow the frequencies of the earth to come up through it. And it's a little company out of Canada that actually puts a sheepskin lining in them so that they're soft and warm during the winter, because I have found it's so difficult, particularly for women, to find shoes that have leather soles. The only shoes I've come across are actually for ballroom dancing, and it's nice to have a flatter shoe. So to wear while we're in the house and to wear in our backyards when it's cold, rather than, only having to be barefoot during, in the summertime I encourage you to be barefoot as much as possible and when it's warm. And for those of you who are able to handle the cold on your feet in the wintertime, more power to you. But for me, that's very challenging. The other thing is sweating is fantastic. So I encourage people to sweat either from saunas. I guess that's not as totally natural, but it does appear that infrared saunas are extraordinary for us, and probably mostly because we're not getting enough infrared light by being outside in the time of the day when the frequencies of infrared are so vitally important for us. We're not outside in the early morning light, which is what sets our capacity to get a deep night's sleep. So sleeping is one of those also very important things. And we can actually tell that we're on the way to wellness by the quality of our sleep. The better we sleep, typically the healthier we ultimately are. And that has so much to do with spending time outdoors, particularly during the first 2 hours after sunrise. And then let's just honor oxygen and working with getting oxygen into our cells and recognizing the need when we are in trouble to get more alkalization drawn to the toxic cells of our bodies by using these simple methods of ingesting a little bit of baking soda. Please don't do that before you eat. We need to be acidic before we eat. So you would want to do this totally away from food so that we can encourage the acidity by maybe drinking some lemon juice or having some bitters or things of that nature so we digest well. One of my favorite things to have before a meal that helps to support the acidity is fermented foods, maybe even a little bit of sauerkraut juice or apple cider vinegar drinks. And they can be quite delicious if you just use like a teaspoon to a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, some of your special aerated water. I like to use a little bit of flavored stevia, and oftentimes I'll soak ginger and turmeric in the apple cider vinegar to add an extra quality of digestive support, healing, and anti-inflammatory support from the ginger and from the turmeric to my little apple cider vinegar drink. But we want to be acidic before we eat and do any of our alkalinization away from food. So my friends, those are some basic things that you can do for yourself. Please find ways to be in joy, to feel safe. And if any of you are interested in exploring more about how you can produce this deep level of safety necessary for health through Safe and Sound, I have another video that goes into that in depth. But please understand that every part of our bodies is innervated in one way or another by either the sympathetic or the vagal nerves. And we need to find our ability to be resilient in order to maintain the highest quality of health, but also the highest quality of joy and peace, creativity, and just enjoyment of being alive. And what else is it about? Fulfillment and enjoyment. So I hope today has been informative for you. Once again, please remember the invisible rainbow. Please remember the Contagion Myth. Those are two books I just cannot recommend enough. And if you are intimidated by the invisible rainbow, just go to the sections that have to do with EMFs and viruses and contagion. And I think you'll be quite shocked at how misled we have been for so long. Take your power back, take your joy back, take your love back. It's time for us to be fulfilled and to do the things that will help not only ourselves, but our communities and our whole planet to heal. Thank you for your time, your attention.